Okay, here's a question for you. How do you feel about mushrooms?
Do you mean like on pizza, like in pasta?
No, actually, I'm talking about the ones that grow in the woods out wild.
You know, I'm a little afraid of them. I mean, I'll see them when I'm out hiking or whatever,
Right.
but I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad.
Well, I could say that. So what if I told you about a woman who every time she went out hiking, she saw nothing but the mushrooms for years, for decades.
I'd have to say she was a little off her rocker.
Little wacko?
Little wacko.
Little
Well,
wacko.
let's see what Jim Duffy has to say for today's Throwback Thursday. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, so
Thanks for having me back.
her name was Mary Banning.
Yes.
Was she off her rocker?
Maybe. So imagine yourself on a bus in 1890, really crowded bus. It would have been a horse-drawn carriage. Lots of people. This woman gets on, she's a little stout, she has some odd mannerisms, light complexion, sandy hair. She's carrying a bucket of mud and mushrooms. These mushrooms, Phallus duplicatus is their scientific name. Common name is netted stinkhorn because they are among the stinkiest mushrooms in the world. They smell like rotting meat, or kind of a combination with fresh dog poop.
Oh, nice.
And
She gets
has
on
a
the
bucket
bus.
of this.
Flies love this. They can smell it from a million miles away. She was very lucky. This woman was very lucky because nobody took her bucket and threw it off the bus that night. But you know that everybody went home that night. Everybody went home that night and told their spouses and kids about the crazy lady on the bus.
Yeah.
Oh my God, with mushrooms.
So how did you become so obsessed with mushrooms?
Mary Banning was born in 1822 in our own Talbot County on Hopkins Neck, kind of between Easton and St. Michael's, looks plain dealing creek. She could see Oxford from her thing. And she got obsessed with mushrooms in the way kids' enthusiasm happens. She's tromping through the woods there and she's just struck by their architecture and their colors and everything else, and they kind of grabbed hold of her imagination and they didn't let go. But of course this is now 1830s, 1840s when she's growing up, and it's not like her parents can connect her with some like STEM education thing to promote science education. Women are not doing science, they're not welcome in science. So she grows up, and her obsession with mushrooms really starts with a charity project. She gets involved with a school for poor, underprivileged kids, and she comes up with this idea to teach them about mushrooms, and then she goes, oh no, I'm crazy, I shouldn't do that, that's nuts. But it's one of those ideas that just grabs hold of her and she couldn't let go. And she ended up thinking of it this way. She called mushrooms beggars by the wayside, botanical outcasts. And what better way is there to teach children about the glories of God's creation than to take the lowliest of those things and teach them all the glorious detail.
Okay.
So she starts, and this thing just snowballs and snowballs. Now she paints them as well. She paints these beautiful watercolor images of the mushrooms that she has. She ends up, the Bannings are still a very prominent family in Talbot County, but they kind of hit on hard times. Her mother got sick, her sister got sick, so she ended up moving to Baltimore, and her prime occupation was caring for her family. But outside of that, all she did was go looking for mushrooms. That's it, 25 years. Looking for mushrooms, cataloging every scientific quality. She spent all her time in libraries at like the Peabody Library in Baltimore and Johns Hopkins and others, learning about science. She corresponded with scientists. And she ended up at the end of these 25 years with a book, all done by hand, of course, that she had 175 different species of mushrooms with beautiful paintings and scientific descriptions. And it turns out, we learn now, that 23 of those were previously unknown to science.
Oh, wow.
So this crazy lady surrounded by flies on the bus, it turns out, was actually one of the best, well, she was probably the best mycologist in our mid-Atlantic region, and one of the best in the whole country.
But this story
that cool?
has a bit of a bittersweet ending, doesn't it?
It does. So she gets older, she has a bunch of chronic diseases, she's losing her eyesight. One of the scientists who helped her out was a guy named Charles Peck at the New York State Museum. They traded letters back and forth when she had questions, and he was kind enough to answer, so she trusted him. And as her health was failing, she sent him her 175 mushroom book. And he must have been busy that day because he opened it up, put it in a stack of papers, and he must have said, I'll look at that some other day. 91 years go by. No one at the museum even knows that her book is in there. Mary Banning dies in 1903. Completely unknown all through the 20th century until 1981, when a guy named John Haynes at the New York State Museum, another mycologist is what they call the people who study mushrooms, stumbles across this thing in a stack of papers, is completely blown away, does all this research about Mary Banning and all the things that she discovered and all that, ends up putting together a traveling exhibit. And now if you go on the interwebs, you'll find Mary Banning widely recognized as one of the leading mycologists of her time. She's in the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame. Wow. She has a mushroom named after her, Anita Banninjana, I believe, the Mary Banning Slender Caesar. I think she would have really loved the title of that traveling exhibit, and it was To Each a Glory Its Own, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Which gets back to her whole school thing where she was trying to teach that, and maybe it applies not just to mushrooms, but to crazy ladies on buses as well.
So the next time you see one,
yes, remember. They might have something going on that's pretty interesting.
Jim, as always, thank you so much.
You bet.
wonderful talking
Each
to you.
story you get.